Hello, friends. Shawna Klingerman for Archer and Olive here, and I am so excited to tell you all about how I am using this adorable little journal for my 100-day project this year. I'm calling this project 100 Days of Tiny Abstracts, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. In a nutshell, the 100-Day Project is all about doing something for 100 days in order to learn and improve your creative skills. For my own 100-Day Project, I am focusing on my art journaling and mixed media skills by just simply adding one little abstract composition to my notebook every day. Every one of these is not perfect, and not every page feels like a work of beauty. But even with the designs that don't wow me, I'm learning. I'm learning about composition, about cohesive colors. I'm building my understanding of how it all works, and that is what this project is all about. Before we dive into adding our next composition to this page right here, let's talk about our supplies. The first thing that I want to mention is this little tool that I created for myself. This is a little masking tool that helps me to mark off the square opening for my composition each and every day. I'll share more about this little template in just a bit, but in the meantime, just know that there is a free template waiting for you. It is on the Archer and Olive blog, and you can find that link below. Another supply that really helps is a handful of binder clips. We are going to be painting here, so you need some tools for painting. I like to have several small paintbrushes on hand, as well as some other tools like a key card for scraping paint, and maybe even a palette knife or two. I also regularly use a white gesso on my page, or maybe even just a white acrylic paint to give myself a little bit of a base. And because part of my process is stamping the date and writing down a few notes, I like to have a simple date stamp, some black ink, and just my favorite journaling pen on hand as well. You're going to want a little jar of water for cleaning your paintbrushes. I also like to have a little bit of scratch paper. I clean my paintbrushes on this as well. Finally, diaper wipes are always a great tool to have on hand. Finally, of course, you are going to need some paints. Any acrylic paint really will do for this process, but I went ahead and linked my favorite paints in the blog post linked below. Each day, to simplify this process, I keep the layout for my pages exactly the same. Each page starts with its abstract painting, and my little square template, of course, helps me keep the placement of the square painting the same page after page after page. I also add a row of swatches for the colors that I used that day, a hand-drawn square frame with the date included, and a few quick notes at the bottom of the page about what I learned that day. Another trick that has really helped me with choosing colors day after day is to use facing pages to play with different variations on a color scheme. This is a great way to play with my color schemes and to compare and contrast what happens to various colors when you pair them together in different ways. Okay, now that we've talked about the basics, it's time to walk through the steps that I take each time I sit down to work on a new tiny abstract page. Step 1 is to mask off your square shape. I designed this stencil specifically to fit my Archer and Olive A6 pages, so it is super easy to position it each day. Once my stencil is in place, I fasten it down with a binder clip, and then I add a few of the paper clips from that pocket in the back of my book. Next up, I add my base layer. For this step, I usually use white gesso, although a simple white acrylic paint works just fine for this as well. This step is very simple and purely optional because acrylic paints will work fine in your art journal of journal without a base layer. However, I have found that starting with a simple layer helps me a lot. First of all, it helps to break the ice because there is nothing more intimidating than a totally blank page. The other thing this base layer does for me is that it adds a little bit of texture and a little bit of extra depth to my composition when it is complete. To create your base layer, simply add a dot of gesso or white paint to your page and spread it around. Personally, I like to do this step with a key card to just do a nice scraped paint effect. And then if my gesso is still wet, I just pull out my heat tool and dry it before I move on to the next layer. Now it is time to choose our colors. And because we're working on a second page in a set of facing compositions, we already have a starting point for creating our color palette. For this spread, the facing page used 5 colors. So for our composition today, we're going to just swap a few of those colors and see how that affects the overall feel of our finished page. There are so many ways to go about creating your own abstract compositions. And although there are a lot of concepts and design rules that can have a real impact, I honestly just want to encourage you that it is also okay to just simply start playing with paint. You will be amazed to see what you can learn from simply adding paint in your own way to your page, one step at a time. For the page I'm creating here today, I am going to start with some lighter tones. Here, I'm using a flat brush and using quick, short strokes to quickly add some color to my page. As I'm finishing with this first color, instead of just dipping this painty brush into water to clean it, I'm going to clean it and keep it dry. The way that I do this is by using a simple piece of scratch paper or sometimes even my art apron, and I just brush all of the excess paint off of my paintbrush until it is no longer leaving color on my page. You can achieve a very different effect with a dry brush than you can with a wet brush, so I would just encourage you to play around and try out both. Now I'm adding some of this gray tone, and this time I put the paint directly on to my craft mat so that I can add it a little bit thinner as I put it onto my page. Now we've reached the point in my process that I usually hit a few times during each page, and that is the point when I realize I need more white space. As I work, I am always trying to practice restraint to not cover my whole square in color, but oftentimes I just get carried away. No worries though, because the beautiful thing about acrylic paint is that you can always paint over what you already have down on your page. So if you add too much color, you can recreate some white space with a bit of white paint. Now I'm going to add this turquoise color, and just for fun, let's put this one down with a different type of tool. A palette knife can be super fun because it can add a little bit of texture and a different feel to your paint as it kind of scrapes and skips across the page. Now here's another trick. Acrylic is awesome because once a layer is dry, you can wipe wet paint off of the top layer with a simple diaper wipe. Oftentimes, this is another strategy I will use if I feel like I got a little bit carried away. Now we're going to hit this layer with our heat tool again so that it's nice and dry and so that we can have a minute to consider what we might like to have be our next step. As you watch me add a few additional layers to this abstract, I just wanted to put a little plug that you definitely want to head to the link below. Over on the Archer and Olive blog, I have a full list of tips and techniques you might want to try, as well as a free printable template for creating your own square stencil for your abstract pages. So definitely go check those out because I can't possibly cover everything in this video right here. I don't know if you noticed, but I kind of do use my fingers a lot on these little tiny abstracts. My fingers are one of the tools that I reach for pretty regularly, and the reason for that is that it does leave a really great texture when you use your finger. I love seeing the slight mark of my fingerprint showing up on the page, plus the shape of your finger is just different than the shape of a scraping tool or a brush. Friends, can I just use this opportunity to say, this is not a practice or a project that you can screw up. Be brave, experiment, try new things, and remember this painting does not have to be perfect. As I'm working, my own personal mantra is, you've got this. And also, don't worry because tomorrow you're going to have a chance to try this again. As you watch me wrap up this little abstract, perhaps you're wondering, how do I know when I'm done? And the honest answer is, I don't. The truth is, I just put the paint on the page, and when I feel ready to stop, I stop. Sometimes it's too soon, sometimes it's too late, but that's okay. The point is that I'm here putting paintbrush or finger or scrapey tool to page. When you feel done, that's when it's time to remove our little stencil and reveal our final tiny abstract. Now you may find that there is a little bit of paint that is leaked under your little stencil, but don't you worry, this really is not a problem. Now that our painting is done and our stencil is removed, let's do our finishing touches. The first thing we're going to do here is add a little dot of paint for each color that we used on this page. Once my dots of paint are down, I'm going to just use the tip of my finger and create a little circle from each spot of paint, wiping my hands in between each color. And now we have a little palette showing the colors we used on this painting. On every page, I add a date stamp, and then using just a journaling pen, I go ahead and draw a simple, imperfect square to frame my abstract painting. I love the way this looks visually, but it's also a great solution for defining that square shape, especially on pages where the color leaked through the edges like it did here today. This final step is an important one to me because it gives me a space to collect my thoughts about what I learned from the layout I created today. What did I love or didn't I love about a particular color combo? What technique is really working for me? Whatever it is, I write it down. And there you have it. When it's all said and done, this book is fast becoming one of my most beloved creative spaces. It is so fun to see the way each tiny abstract builds on the last, and every time I fill another page, I just feel increasingly giddy about this little journal filled up to the brim with tiny abstracts that I love so much. Friends, I hope that this inspires you to pull out some acrylic paint and to get a little messy and a lot brave with your own abstract painting. I hope that this video tutorial was inspiring and freeing, and that you might get a little brave over there and create some little abstracts of your own. Be sure to head to the link below so that you can find out more. And friends, until next time, just keep creating.